Welcome back to Peter Jennings. If you're new here, this is where we break down the most critical military operations on the planet. No fluff, just facts and the kind of depth you won't find anywhere else. So if that sounds like your kind of content, hit subscribe because we cover stories like this every single week. Now let's get into today's story, and it is a big one. The numbers are in. Over 3,000 strikes across Iran, 43 warships destroyed, an 83% decrease in Iran's drone attacks after launch sites were crippled across the country. But the headline sending shockwaves through military circles isn't any of those figures. The real story is what's happened to Iran's secret bunkers, the underground fortresses that Tehran spent decades building and billions of dollars perfecting. Those bunkers are gone, not damaged, not partially destroyed. Gone. Caved in on themselves, sealed shut from the outside and turned into the very tombs that will define Iran's military downfall. And here's what makes this story so extraordinary. The United States didn't need some exotic superweapon to pull it off. What it used was precise, devastating, and terrifyingly effective. Bunker buster bombs that erased Iran's underground missile cities from the map, one by one. The U.S. tactic has been brutally simple. Take out the bunkers and you destroy Iran's ability to fight back. Using its array of bombers, with the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber as the centerpiece, the United States has systematically dismantled Iran's vast network of missile cities. The underground storage and launch sites that Iran spent years constructing and was so proud of that it actually showed them to the world have turned into its greatest weakness. By the time you reach the end of this breakdown, you'll understand exactly why. Let's start with the words that made the military world stop cold. On March 5th, Admiral Brad Cooper, head of U.S. Central Command, delivered a statement that left no room for interpretation. In the last hour, he said, 2 U.S. bombers dropped dozens of 2,000-pound penetrator bombs targeting deeply buried ballistic missile launchers. He wasn't simply reporting a strike. He was describing a campaign. Cooper confirmed the U.S. is following the direct orders of President Donald Trump, orders to raise Iran's entire missile capability to the ground. Then he went further. The president had given them an additional task, to level Iran's ballistic missile industrial base. Not just destroying existing weapons, not just removing their ability to use what they have, eliminating their ability to rebuild entirely. This is not a conventional military strike. This is the systematic and total destruction of an entire military doctrine. Iran had placed enormous confidence in its ballistic missile stockpile. IDF estimates put Iran's arsenal at approximately 2,500 ballistic missiles as of March 1st. Tehran believed those numbers gave it power. It treated the sheer volume of its arsenal as an insurance policy against any military confrontation. Iran was catastrophically wrong. It's losing its missiles, its launch sites, and based on Cooper's statement, its manufacturing capacity is next in line. All of this is being driven by a weapon that deserves its own moment in this story. Cooper didn't name the specific bomb. He mentioned its weight and purpose. But from those 2 data points, military analysts can identify exactly what was deployed. The weapons in question are almost certainly BLU-109s, attached to GBU-31 Joint Direct Attack munitions. The GBU-31 is a GPS-guided bomb kit that transforms an unguided munition into a precision weapon capable of striking a target with extraordinary accuracy. This combination allows bombers without stealth capabilities to fire their payloads from up to 15 miles away, well outside the range of any surviving Iranian air defense system, and escape before Iran's defenses can mount any meaningful response. The BLU-109 itself weighs approximately 2,000 pounds, built with a steel alloy casing specifically engineered to punch through hardened targets before detonating. When it hits, it doesn't explode on the surface. It drives deep into the structure, then unleashes its high-explosive blast fragmentation warhead, destroying everything in its path and carving out a crater large enough for follow-up strikes. Those follow-up attacks can bring more BLU-109s or other munitions that compound the devastation, turning an already catastrophic explosion into the total annihilation of an underground missile facility. We've seen exactly what these bombs can do. On February 7, 2025, the war zone reported on a BLU-129 attached to a GBU-31, used in the strike that killed Hezbollah's then-leader Hassan Nasrallah, along with several of his senior officials. Israeli intelligence had pinpointed an underground bunker where Nasrallah and his commanders were coordinating operations. One BLU-109 was all it took. The bomb penetrated so precisely and so deeply that nearby civilians at the surface survived the strike. That tells you everything about how focused this weapon is. It goes exactly where it's aimed, and what it finds there does not survive. That is precisely what the United States unleashed on Iran's secret bunkers, and likely not in ones or twos, but in numbers so overwhelming that survival was never a realistic outcome for what lay beneath. Now here's the question at the center of this entire story. How has the US been able to do this so effectively across so many separate targets? Because there is a fatal flaw built into the very concept of Iran's missile cities. A flaw that didn't just make these strikes possible, it made them inevitable. To understand that flaw, you first need to understand what a missile city actually is. The concept is largely unique to Iran. These are not simple storage warehouses or conventional bases. They are massive underground complexes, networks of tunnels, storage chambers, transportation corridors, and launch facilities carved entirely beneath the earth. Iran invested decades and incalculable resources into these structures, convinced they form the backbone of its deterrent strategy. The logic was clear. If Iran's regime ever came under existential threat, it could launch a saturation strike from these underground cities. Hundreds or thousands of missiles fired simultaneously, overwhelming any defense and destroying targets across the region. Iran was so confident in these facilities that it invited cameras inside 4 separate times. The Foundation for Defense of Democracies reported on the most recent of these tours in March 2025. The footage showcased medium-range ballistic missiles, including the Haj Qasim and the Qadr H, both with ranges around 1,000 miles, plus land attack cruise missiles and the elaborate tunnel networks built to move and store them. Iran released this footage as a deliberate power play, a signal to its adversaries. What Iran never understood is that it was doing something far more damaging than flexing its military muscle. It was handing its enemies a roadmap directly to its greatest vulnerability. The Wall Street Journal examined where it all went wrong in a March 5th analysis. Decades of work went into these bunkers. It took roughly 1 week of combined US and Israeli operations to demonstrate they were never the war-winning assets Iran's leadership believed them to be. The reason is straightforward. US and Israeli intelligence had already mapped the locations of these so-called secret bunkers long before any strike was launched. Because you simply cannot hide the construction of a massive underground complex, roads must be built to reach these sites. Heavy equipment and materials must be transported in over years. Personnel move in and out constantly. Satellite imagery captures every single one of those movements, every delivery, every vehicle, every telltale sign of what lies beneath the surface. These vulnerabilities gave Iran's enemies time to watch, to study, and to plan. And when the moment came, they struck with firepower so overwhelming that the missile cities Iran spent a generation building have become almost irrelevant to the outcome of this war. Engagement question. Number 1. Now I want to stop here for a moment, because I genuinely want your take on this. Drop a comment and tell me, did Iran make an irreversible strategic mistake by locking its entire missile arsenal into fixed underground bunkers rather than maintaining a mobile, dispersed force that enemies could never reliably locate? Think about that carefully. I read every comment on this channel. Back to the battlefield. US and Israeli aircraft and drones are circling over dozens of these underground complexes, striking missile launchers the moment they emerge to fire. Waves of heavy bombers are dropping munitions directly onto the sites, sealing Iranian weapons below ground across multiple locations. Iran's air defenses are functionally gone, and the bunkers that were supposed to be Iran's impenetrable fortresses have been converted into something else entirely: death traps. Here is the fatal flaw in full. The BLU-109 isn't built to reach the absolute deepest levels of Iran's underground missile cities. But it doesn't need to, because every underground bunker, no matter how deep, no matter how reinforced, has one unavoidable requirement: ways in and out, tunnels, entrances, exit corridors. Those access points cannot exist hundreds of meters underground. They must connect to the surface. The US identified every single one, and then it used its bunker busters to close them permanently. Entrances blown apart, exit tunnels collapsed, corridors caved in under 2,000-pound penetrators. Iranian military personnel and their missiles are now entombed inside the very facilities meant to guarantee their survival. Satellite imagery published by the New York Times on March 3rd shows the destruction in before and after detail across multiple sites. A facility near Isfahan leveled by March 3rd. The Kangavar underground entrance fully caved in by March 2nd. In Kermanshah, above-ground structures destroyed and a telltale crater photographed right beside the tunnel entrances to the region's missile city. The pattern is consistent everywhere. Bunker after bunker, crater after crater. Research associate Sam Lyer of the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies explained the core issue to the Wall Street Journal with precision. What was once mobile and difficult to find, he said, is no longer mobile and easier to hit. That single observation captures the entire tragedy of Iran's missile city strategy. By concentrating hundreds of ballistic missiles into fixed underground locations, Iran surrendered the one quality that made its arsenal genuinely dangerous: mobility. A mobile launcher is extraordinarily hard to track. It can relocate, it can disappear. A missile city cannot do any of those things. It stays where it was built, and once its location is confirmed, it is finished. Former U.S. Army missile specialist Colin David described the operational approach clearly. These attacks are carried out in waves, he explained, destroying 2 or 3 targets at a time. After multiple waves, the bases lose all effectiveness due to the cumulative destruction of surface structures and launch systems. Iran's missile cities cannot move, and as the world has now seen, they were not nearly as secret as Iran believed. Less than 2 weeks into this conflict, the United States holds something no military planner assumes will arrive this quickly: time. That advantage exists because the U.S. hasn't only been destroying bunkers. It has simultaneously dismantled Iran's entire air defense network. The IDF's chief of staff reported that approximately 80% of Iran's air defense systems have been neutralized. With no meaningful air defense in operation, U.S. and Israeli aircraft fly through Iranian airspace with near total freedom. Tehran itself is now exposed. Any missile city that survived the initial waves faces a countdown. Not a question of whether the next strike comes, but only when. And with surveillance aircraft now able to fly over Iran without threat, America's targeting intelligence grows with every flight. The so-called safe bunkers are shattered, available to be struck at any hour from virtually any direction. The battlefield numbers tell the full story. On February 28th, Iran launched 480 missiles in a single day, a moment of desperate intensity as bunker busters began stripping away its firing capacity. By March 9th, that daily count had fallen to just 40, a 92% decline in under 2 weeks. Drone launches followed the same arc, dropping from 720 per day to just 60. This is not strategic restraint. This is Iran physically losing the ability to fight the way it always planned to fight. Engagement question. And here's the second question I want to leave with you, because this one carries consequences well beyond Iran. Given everything we've covered about the vulnerability of fixed underground missile infrastructure, do you think other nations currently constructing similar underground complexes are watching what's happening and fundamentally rethinking their entire defensive strategy? Leave your answer in the comments below. This is exactly the kind of conversation this channel exists for. According to Trump, the U.S. needs just 4 minutes from detecting a launch to sending a bomber to destroy the site permanently. 4 minutes. That is not a window of escape. Even if a launcher survives the immediate response, the opening it used to fire is already gone, removing yet another option from an ever-shrinking list. Iran's crude mountainside silo attempts, holes cut into hillsides pointing toward the Persian Gulf, are neutralized just as easily. What we are witnessing is the complete collapse of a military doctrine that Iran spent decades constructing and billions of dollars funding. The missile cities that Tehran believed would guarantee its ability to wage war against any adversary have become exactly what every fixed, immovable target eventually becomes when it faces a better informed and technologically superior enemy. A target. A large, thoroughly mapped, stationary target that gets struck in waves until nothing is left worth hitting. Iran believed its underground cities made it formidable. They made it predictable. In warfare, predictability is fatal. Every illusion of Iranian military power has been shattered alongside its bunkers. The regime that once proudly showcased its underground fortresses to the world is watching those same structures become the architecture of its own defeat. And the consequences extend far beyond Iran. Vladimir Putin is watching from Moscow as every collapsed tunnel and neutralized launcher chips away at the strategic alignment he spent years building across the Middle East. The axis of power he envisioned, with Iran as a central pillar, is being dismantled bomb by bomb. We will be breaking down exactly what this means for Russia right here on Peter Jennings, so you will not want to miss that. If this level of military analysis is what you come here for, the best thing you can do right now is subscribe. Hit that button so you never miss a story. Every week we go deeper than the headlines, into what's actually happening and why it matters. And before you go, leave a comment. Tell me which part of this story stayed with you. The fatal flaw in Iran's bunker strategy? The surgical precision of the BLU-109? The speed at which this military doctrine collapsed? I want to know what you think. Thank you for being here on Peter Jennings. Stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one.